In a remote village, where time seemed to have slowed down, along with the dreams of those who lived there, lived Elias, a young man with a vibrant heart and hands calloused from an early age. The house where he lived with Aline, his wife, was simple, made of weathered wood and roof tiles that danced to the sound of the wind. They had little, almost nothing in material terms, but overflowed with affection and companionship. They married for love, the kind that doesn't depend on ceremonies or golden rings, but that is sealed in glances and promises whispered at bedtime. Despite the hard routine and empty pockets, Elias nurtured a persistent dream to give the woman he loved a more dignified life, with provision and peace. The problem was that in that village forgotten by the maps, work was as rare as rain in summer. And that's why, in a burst of courage and hope, he decided to leave, even without a clear destination, even without knowing how long he'd be gone. Love was his fuel, faith his map. On the morning he left the village, the sun rose timidly, as if it knew the sadness hanging in the air. Elias packed his few belongings into a worn backpack, looked at the small room where he had slept with Aline in recent nights, and sighed. She walked him to the gate, holding a handkerchief and her tears. The silence between them was more eloquent than any farewell speech. Before taking the first step, he looked into her eyes and said, his voice choked, "Promise me you'll wait. That even without news, without certainty, your heart will remain strong." She nodded with her eyes, as if making a pact before God. Elias left, his heart torn and his soul full of faith. He walked for days under sun, rain, and hunger, sleeping outdoors and feeding on dry bread and prayers. He repeated to himself like a mantra, "It's worth it. For her, for us, it's worth it." And so he continued, step by step, guided by the desire to one day return with dignity. Providence or divine intervention led him to a distant farm where a middle-aged man was looking for someone willing to help. Elias made an unusual proposal: to work without salary for an indefinite time, accumulating everything to be paid at the end. The employer, surprised, accepted. Thus began a new cycle, not only of labor but of silence. 20 years passed, like wind rustling through the trees, constant but almost imperceptible. Elias didn't send letters, didn't receive news. He lived for the work. Each day he woke before the sun, tending to the land, animals, and harvest. He was respected but remained reserved. Inside, he nurtured his love for Aline, like someone keeping a flame lit in the middle of a storm. He never knew if she had forgotten him, if she was alive, if she still waited. But he carried on, believing in the promise made that morning. Faith, once again, was his secret nourishment. When he finally felt his mission there was complete, he informed his employer of his departure. He expected, like any righteous man, to receive the salary for 2 decades of work. But the farmer, with a strange light in his eyes, presented him with an unusual choice. He could take all the accumulated money, or, if he preferred, 3 pieces of wisdom, without a single coin. Elias hesitated. He felt the weight of the decision in his chest. He thought of Aline, the humble home, the years spent apart. The money would be useful, yes, but something inside him, something deeper and intuitive, pushed him toward the second option. The farmer then told him, "Never take shortcuts in life, for what seems easy may be fatal. Do not give in to curiosity about evil, for it may cost you your life. And never make important decisions in moments of anger or pain, for you may regret them forever." Finally, he gave him 3 loaves of bread, 2 for the journey, and the 3rd, special, to share with his wife upon reunion. Elias set out, the advice echoing in his chest and the loaves guarded with almost sacred care. The road was long and different from the one he traveled in his youth. Now, each step felt heavier, each hill steeper. His body had aged, but his heart remained inflamed with hope. On the third day of walking, a man suggested a shortcut through the forest, promising to cut the travel time in half. Elias, exhausted, considered accepting. His body ached, his feet bled. But at the exact moment he turned to take the new path, he remembered the first piece of advice. He stood still for a few seconds, in silence, then returned to the old trail, even though it was longer. Days later, he learned that the shortcut was a trap. Thieves ambushed and killed unsuspecting travelers. A chill ran through his body. That simple piece of advice had saved his life. And once again, he gave silent thanks for the wisdom he had chosen instead of gold. A few days later, nearly out of strength, Elias arrived at a small village and decided to spend the night in a modest inn. During the night, a piercing scream shattered the silence and woke him with a racing heart. He jumped up and was about to open the door to see what was happening when he remembered the second piece of advice. Do not give in to curiosity about evil. He took a deep breath, locked the door, and went back to bed, even with his heart unsettled. The next morning, as he came down for breakfast, the innkeeper, looking weary, casually remarked, "Sometimes at night, a woman who lost her mind roams the halls. She already killed a man who came out to help her, thinking she was in danger." Elias swallowed hard. The second piece of advice had protected him once more, and that sparked in him the awareness that wisdom isn't just pretty words, it's a shield. He continued his journey with more cautious steps, as someone who finally understands that the invisible also protects. Days later, finally, Elias saw in the distance the roof he had dreamed of seeing again. His heart raced as if it were running ahead of his body. But as he drew closer, what he saw paralyzed him. In the garden, a woman, his wife, was stroking the hair of a young man. The boy, seated beside her, smiled, and she looked at him with tenderness. Elias felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His stomach churned. 20 years of silence, longing, and faithfulness collapsed in a second. He was overcome with silent fury, with the pain of a man betrayed, abandoned, deceived. He took a step forward to storm into the garden and confront her, but the third piece of advice screamed inside him. Never make decisions in moments of anger or pain. He stopped, sat down beneath a tree a few meters away. He cried silently until sleep took him. When the sun rose, his heart had calmed. He knocked on the door of the house and was greeted by Aline, who surprised him with a hug that dissolved 20 years of distance. She embraced him with a love that had not aged. Through tears and smiles, she told him what he never could have imagined. That young man was their son, conceived shortly before Elias left. She had no way to tell him, as she never knew where he was. She raised the boy alone, sustained by faith that one day Elias would return. The young man looked at him with astonishment and reverence. "You're my father?" Elias dropped to his knees and embraced him with the strength of 2 decades. When they entered the house, the three of them sat at the table. Elias then opened the third loaf of bread, the one meant to be shared with Aline. When he broke it, he found inside 3 bars of gold, diamonds, and rubies, hidden there as a symbol of gratitude and recognition from his employer. The reward was there, but the true treasure was the reunited family, preserved faith, and fulfilled promise. Elias understood finally that wisdom is worth more than gold, and that faithfulness, patience, and faith are seeds that bloom in the right season, in the right soil, under the quiet care of a God who never forgets. After 20 years of silence, sacrifice, and faithfulness, Elias gave up wealth to follow 3 pieces of wisdom, and life tested him in each one. If it had been you, would you have chosen the gold or the wisdom? Leave your comment and share this story with someone who needs to remember that faith, patience, and truth always find their time.